Good morning.
I am the Reverend William Levwood, and I have the great privilege of being the minister here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. Many people affectionately refer to me as Rev Lev, and my pronouns are he and him. If you're in person, a reminder to silence your phones. And whether you're joining us in person or online, let us begin the service as we always do by taking a deep breath together as we center ourselves for worship. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land who live on in their acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Sheila Doles. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive community that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world. If you're new to Accotink and would like to talk more about this church, look around. Anybody with a cross-stitch name tag is a member and would be happy to share with you about this congregation and how you may join us on our journey. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour immediately after the service. We're so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
Every Sunday, for about a year now, we share some good news as a part of our Defending Our Democracy initiative. So here's two pieces of good news for this week. One is that Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger restored voting rights to 66,000 people with past felony convictions. And the Education Department will erase roughly $11 billion in federal student loan debt owed by more than 170,000 borrowers after a federal appeals court rejected the administration's attempt to delay relief for students who claim they were defrauded by their schools. So they claim they were defrauded, and they tried to circumvent them even getting to put those claims forth. And then the good news happened. All right. Our theme for the month is Love at the Center. If I can have the slide now. Love at the Center is, no, the other slide, the one with the rings. I might have put it in the wrong place. Did I put it in the wrong place? There it is. So, Love at the Center is our common read, our UUA common read for this church year. It's a compilation of theological essays from UUs from around the country and perhaps around the world. I don't remember actually. And there's discussion guides, and there's even religious education or spiritual development curriculums, and it follows this map of these different layers. Love within ourselves, love between us, love amongst us, love beyond us, and all of that held by the love that holds us all. So we're taking this month and into September a little bit to explore these different levels and ways of putting love at the center. Last Sunday we looked at love beyond us with a focus in some ways on immigration justice, because I think we can all agree that's something that love is calling us to show up for. But the focus of that sermon and that service was a little bit broader than that, because it was to listen for what love is calling you to do in this moment, whether that's related to immigration justice or whether it's related to something else. That was the focus of last Sunday. And this Sunday, we're going to talk about the love amongst us. The love that, and I may not be doing justice to what this ring is about, because some of what this is about is how we structure our communities together, how we do governance, how we do committee meetings, and that's not really what I'm going to talk about this morning. But I am going to talk about how we come together and how we make this community welcoming and inclusive spiritual home and a real sanctuary for everyone who shares our values and who needs that. Because that is more needed now than ever. And because it's an ongoing practice, we can be, I think we are good at being welcoming and inclusive, and also, sometimes we're not. Sometimes there's ways we can be better. And that's an ongoing practice as a covenantal faith, to practice the covenant of putting love at the center and becoming ever more welcoming and ever more inclusive as a community and as individuals. So that's what we're going to explore this Sunday, and then we'll move on next Sunday to other parts of this ring. And hopefully we'll have a discussion group that I'll announce later in September or October, where we look at this book, Love at the Center, because it's really a fabulous book. And though we don't have one shared theology, that doesn't mean that theology, broadly meaning how we make meaning of the world, isn't important, right? It's very important how we make meaning of the world together. So it's a good idea to study that. So with that, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join in reciting the words on the screen. These words come from our shared UU values. Love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. Love is the practice of our living tradition. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to be a beloved community by cultivating generosity and celebrating diversity. We help everyone flourish by honoring the web of life and transforming the world with love.
I'm not alone, I'm not alone. For me the world was created. I'm not alone, I'm not alone. To dust I will return. I'm not alone. I forgot for a minute I'm not alone. Who I belong to. I'm not alone. Mama, the wind and rain, I'm not the alone. Beauty I'm and not the pain. I'm not alone. I'm not for alone. Me the world was created. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I'm not to alone. Dust I will return. Good morning. My name is Michelle Anderson, and I am the Children and Youth Spiritual Development Director. I'm so excited to see you all today. Today we're going to tell a story for our Time for All Ages. It's called A Place to Belong. It was based on Longing to Live Fully by Reverend Mikhail O. Slack, and it was in this book Rev Lev has been talking about, Love in the Center, Unitarian Universalist Theologies, edited by our very own Reverend Dr. Sevilla Betancourt. Is it Dr. Reverend or Reverend Doctor? Reverend Doctor. Got it right the first time. But I need a helper first to find out what's in a wonder box. Oh, you can leave it down there. Just open up the box and see what's inside. That's all right. It's all good. What's inside?
Oh, it matches me. I knew I was supposed to do this.
Oh. Mira, what is that flag?
Well, it looks like a mixture of men and women and angels.
So it's blue and pink and white. Does anybody know what this stands for, this flag? Transgender pride. Yeah, and here we celebrate all different kinds of pride, don't we? Thank you. Appreciate it. So, there was once a woman who hadn't talked to her parents in 15 years. That's older than some of you. They had said hurtful things when she told them she was transgender. So she moved away, and the silence between them grew and grew. Meanwhile, at a congregation in another town, a minister was teaching a workshop to help people understand what it means to be transgender. The woman's parents decided to go. They were nervous, but they wanted to learn. After the first class, the parents stayed to talk with the minister. Oops, lost the... Can you still hear me? Okay. We have a daughter, they said quietly. We haven't spoken to her in 15 years. We said some awful things. We don't know if she will ever forgive us. The minister helped them to think about what to say.
I'm not alone, I'm not alone, I'm not alone,
I'm not alone, I'm not alone, I'm not alone. That week, the parents called their daughter and left a voicemail. We're taking this class, they said. We're learning new things. We'd really like to talk to you, if you're willing. On the third Sunday of the workshop, something amazing happened. Their daughter showed up. She had listened to the voicemail and decided to come see what her parents were learning. When she walked in and sat down next to them, everyone started crying. Happy tears. I'm not alone, 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 I'm not alone. After the workshop series ended, the daughter asked the minister a question. My friends and I need a safe place to meet once a month. Could we use a room at the church? Yes, the minister said right away. Free space as long as you need it. I'm not alone, 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 I'm not alone. For 10 years, that group met at the church. Trans people came together to support each other, make friends, and know they belonged somewhere. One congregation's love had made room for a whole community to feel safe and welcomed. Sometimes love means making space. Sometimes it means saying yes before you even know all the details. So I'm going to put on a different hat for a minute. Many of you know that, or you know now if you didn't before, that I'm the Children and Youth Spiritual Development Director. But what you may not know is that before that, I was a congregant here. And like many of our families, I brought my children to Accotink when they were preschoolers. They're now 20 and 22. I had attended AUC by myself for several months prior and had cried through almost every service, joyous because I had found a faith that welcomed me wholly. I had never heard of Unitarian Universalism before I came to the preschool here, and hence discovered UU theology by reading the visitor's packet after I dropped my children off for the day. Later, after bringing my kids to Accotink for a few months, I was asked to be a teacher in the program. I wondered, how could I, a newbie to the Unitarian Universalist faith, still not really sure what it meant to be a UU, teach the children? Well, I discovered it was actually facilitating wonder, inviting growth, and developing relationships, not really teaching. I learned more from volunteering with the children and youth groups than I did by attending adult worship and education. Sorry, Rep Love. But not because those weren't wonderful by themselves, but because the children's program wasn't just in my head. It wasn't just theoretical. It was a chance to practice my beliefs firsthand. I learned about covenant, making amends and repairing relationships, how to relate to people who were different from me, and to celebrate those differences rather than just tolerate them. I learned to really listen, and the wisdom within a child or a young person is profound. Those who grew up in the faith are always happy to share their knowledge with those who did not. But mostly, I learned that the lesson itself wasn't the true point. It was being present, listening to each other, exploring together, and caring for one another. That's what the Children and Youth Spiritual Development Program is all about. So I'm telling you this because we are in need of at least 5 additional volunteers in our program before the mid-September start back up. That's soon. An interest form, a background check, and safety training are required before you are put on the schedule, and that takes about a month. So if you are interested in facilitating wonder, learning from the greatest teachers you will ever have, our children and youth, then talk to me after service. Let's sign you up and get you going on your way to being a CYSD facilitator. Please consider giving back to that which has given you so much, just like I have done for so many years. Thank you.
85% of Unitarian Universalists, on average, in any congregation, were raised in no faith or in a different faith than Unitarian Universalism. So raise your hand if you were raised Unitarian Universalist. Yeah, just a few of us. Raise your hand if you came to this, you were raised in a different faith and then you came to this faith as an adult. All right? And then put your hands down and we're all going to sing, I'm Not Alone. Yeah. You're not alone being new here, and you're not alone if you were raised here. There are others of all of those types.
I'm not alone, 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 I forgot for a minute who I belong to, I'm not alone, Mama, the wind and rain, the beauty and the pain. I'm not alone, I'm not alone. For me the world was created. I'm not alone, I'm not alone. To dust I will return.
This is an excerpt from Longing to Fully Living by Reverend Michael O. Slack in Love at the Center. Love is central to a faith and worldview that is supposed to make a way for all of us to be our whole selves and to bring our whole selves to the project of getting free together. But as a Black person who ministers with intention to Black people in our faith, I can tell you that Black people cannot be and bring our whole selves here. Neither can those of us who are trans and non-binary. Neither can people with disabilities, or poor, underemployed, or unhoused people. Perhaps the naming of love as our central value is a deep expression of longing more than it is anything else. But we can't stop there. Understand me. There's nothing wrong with a deep desire to put love at the center of all we do, say, and believe as Unitarian Universalists. But how do we move from longing into fully living into what is truest and best about our faith? How do we shift from what's aspirational and pretty from a distance to what's tangibly real and understandably messy up close? If longing is the spiritual and emotional tug of love, then risk-taking is the tangible, accountable embodiment of that love. A faithful embodiment of love at the center isn't just check a box and move on kind of endeavor. It is a prepare a place for those who've not yet arrived kind of effort. Faithful embodiment of our values is about bridging the gaps between who we are and who we are called to be.
So Reverend Michael Slack is a Black trans Unitarian Universalist minister. He was for a long time the minister for Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, our online group for Black UUs. And he's now the minister locally here at the church in Rockville, at the congregation in Rockville. So at the beginning of his essay in the anthology Love at the Center, which you just heard an excerpt from, at the beginning of the essay, Reverend Michael Slack starts by sharing some cynicism about love and our efforts to place love at the center of Unitarian Universalism, writing, "I've heard too many stories and sat pastorally with too many people in the wake of horrific behavior they experienced in our UU congregations not to feel that cynicism." I named where Reverend Michael has served in the past to give even more credence to his statement about sitting with people who've had those experiences. And when I share with members of this congregation that I too have sat pastorally with other members of this congregation who have not felt fully welcomed here at Accotink, who have even left this congregation for periods of time because of unwelcoming behavior they experienced here, I'm often met with wide-eyed looks of surprise, followed by statements of disbelief. When I share that I have heard from people who were hurt by exclusionary behaviors from AUC members, sometimes other AUC members express so much surprise that it's as if they are refusing to believe that it's true. They say to me things like, "I've just never seen that." And they say it in a way that means, "Rev, you must be wrong about this." It's so different from that person's experience and that person's longing for who they want us to be as a congregation that they just cannot or will not believe it, even though I just told them that I've heard directly from people they know and love. Of course, I don't name the people, but they are people they know and love. People respond this way even when I happen to know that they themselves have done harmful, exclusionary things. Now, if you're thinking, wow, some people, I just cannot believe the hypocrisy. Doesn't look like any of you are actually thinking that, but just in case you are, I want you to pause and slow your roll for 2 reasons. Number 1, you, as hard as it may be to believe, are probably, no, I say definitely, one of these people, if not in a moment in this congregation, at another time in your life. There are those wide eyes again. The Rev, you must be making this up, incredulity again. But you are that hypocritical person who claims to want desperately to be fully welcoming of everyone, and especially fully welcoming of black people and trans and non-binary people, and especially of disabled people, and especially poor, unemployed, or unhoused people. You are that hypocritical person who claims to be committed to being fully welcoming and then makes a mistake and does something exclusionary. You are, and so am I. So am I. Because it isn't actually hypocrisy. It isn't because you and I don't have that deep, deep longing. We do. You do. I do. I know that. I trust that. And so does Michael Slack, by the way. In fact, sometimes it's even that very longing that's getting in the way. Sometimes our desire to be welcoming and inclusive, to be, as our mission statement puts it, a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, can be so strong that we cannot bear to see the ways we are not. And when that happens, our longing becomes a barrier to the very thing we are so desperately long for. Because you can't be welcoming and inclusive if you can't allow yourself to see when you're not. Okay, so if you're still with me, how do we open ourselves to seeing when we're not being welcoming and inclusive? And how, like the parents in our Time for All Ages story, do we make more space in our hearts? So I have to tell you, sometimes I really hate being a preacher. Really hate preparing and delivering sermons in particular. And it's not because it's time-consuming. It's not because it's challenging to have something worthwhile to say up here from the pulpit week after week after week. Those things are hard. Did I mention how grateful I am that UU ministers get study leave every year? I did actually last Sunday when I came back from study leave, and a Sunday out of the pulpit every month. Thank you, Unitarian Universalism, for that. But this Sunday, it isn't the grind of being a preacher that makes me want to run away from giving sermons. What's truly most challenging about preaching a sermon is when it requires me to be vulnerable. To stand up here and bare my soul before you, to publicly admit my shortcomings, to publicly reckon with the ways that I fail to fully love, celebrate, and sometimes even accept other people. But if I don't do that, how can I ask you all to do that? So here it goes. Is anyone familiar with the Harvard implicit bias measure? Yeah, some of you are. It's a way of measuring hidden or implicit bias. You can use this to measure your hidden bias about all kinds of things, about sexuality, about gender identity, about race, about cultural background, about religion, about age. So several years ago, I went online and I took the IAT, as its acronym is. And in many ways, it was a confidence boost. It didn't reveal any racial bias or any bias against Muslims. Yay, go me. I say that playfully, but it's important to state a few things. It's important to state here that whatever the IAT measures, implicit bias is not fixed. It's not a forever thing. It's an unconscious residual of societal prejudices, which means that you can alter your implicit bias. So I actually felt quite affirmed because in the years preceding taking that assessment, I had been working on acknowledging and working through my hidden racial bias. So it suggested, the IAT suggested that my efforts had at least been somewhat successful. Now, I don't remember all of the assessments I took, and I didn't take all of them, but I do remember the one that revealed bias. The one that showed that I had a bias against fat people. I didn't like it. I didn't want it to be true. However, I did think it was true. It was consistent with my understanding of my own bias, even though I didn't really want to fully admit it to myself. It made me remember a conversation I had many, many years ago when I was in my mid-20s. For context, I turned 50 in a couple of months. And what I remember is that I was judgmental about fat people. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of believing that fat people eat unhealthy, fatty foods and don't exercise, and that's why they're fat. And I remember the friend I was talking with was a little shocked and responded with something like, "William, you do know it's hereditary. You do know that fat people have slower metabolisms, different body types." And I didn't know that. That was a surprise to me. Now, as I shared, that was about 25 years ago. And I don't feel like I still have an explicit bias. See, back then I didn't even just have an implicit bias. I had an explicit bias that I was open about. I don't feel like I still have that explicit bias against fat people like I did then. And it was, I don't know, maybe a decade ago when I took that measure that showed that I had an implicit bias. And by then I didn't want to have that implicit bias. I'd grown enough for that. So while it made me nervous and even scared to do so, this week I took the measure, the assessment again. I was scared because I know that I don't want to have bias, explicit or implicit, against fat people and in favor of thin people. So I was scared. I was scared because I have a longing to accept and celebrate all people. I was scared because implicit bias is by its very nature hidden from our full conscious awareness. So I knew that it might show that I still have an implicit bias against fat people. So I want to tell you that I'm happy that when I took the implicit association test this week, it didn't show that. It said I don't still have a bias against fat people and a preference for thin people. I want to tell you that I'm happy, but I am happy, but that's really not the point. It's really not the point. I know I've made some progress over the years in becoming more welcoming and inclusive of fat people. And I also know that even though I'm happy my scores show that progress, the work is never done. The point isn't where you end up. The point is doing the work. So what is the work? How do we expand the space in our hearts so that we're becoming more welcoming and inclusive? In the story for our Time for All Ages, the parents who said harmful things to their trans child, many years later, spurred by that longing, by a longing to love that child, took a workshop to better their understanding and open up space in their hearts. Now, I don't know exactly what that workshop included, but I imagine that part of what changed their hearts was learning more about what it means to be transgender, so that their mind, polluted, we could say, by social scripts that are transphobic, could catch up with what their hearts so desired, which was to reconnect with their beloved child. So I feel like there are three parts for making space in our hearts to be more welcoming and inclusive. Over the past 25 years, I've participated in communities that have been accepting of and even celebratory of fat people. such that even 25 years ago I had a friend who rebuked me for my prejudice. So that participation in welcoming and inclusive communities changed my heart, broke down my explicit bias against fat people, and creating a longing to overcome even my implicit bias, and an openness to seeing that bias so that I could move beyond it. So those are the first two steps. The first step, breaking down explicit bias, best done in beloved community. And the second step is searching out the implicit bias that we know lurks in our hearts and minds, because that implicit bias is pervasive and it persists. And then we need experiences that open us up. That's the third step. And I remember experiencing a transformative moment like this, like what those parents, I imagine, learned in that workshop, but for me it was reading a book. Now, some of you may know Martin Seligman. He's most well known for coining the term positive psychology. But he's also written a book back in 1993 called What You Can Change and What You Can't. And in that book, there is a chapter on fatness and dieting where Dr. Seligman breaks down the myths about fatness. It turns out it isn't because fat people exercise less. It isn't because fat people eat more. Studies show that fat people don't eat more calories than thin people. In fact, sometimes they eat less. And it isn't because fat people eat less healthy. A fat person can exercise more, eat less, and eat more healthy than a thin person and still be fat. Or let's put that another way. When you see a thin person, that thin person may never exercise, may eat like a glutton, and eating too much and eating all the wrong foods. Because it turns out fatness is not the result of a lack of willpower. That it turns out that how fat or thin we are is largely genetic, based on differences in body types and slower or faster metabolisms. Maybe you already knew this, but the first time I read about it years ago, it blew my mind. And it matters a great deal, because without this knowledge in place of societal bias, we believe that fat people are, as Dr. Seligman writes, weak-willed slobs. Fat people end up believing this about themselves, leading to self-hate, depression, anxiety, not to mention extreme dieting, which science proves doesn't work. The weight comes back. Remember, I said science, multiple studies have proved the weight comes back, often with more weight increase. The dieting itself is demoralizing. It's hard on the cardiovascular system, and it places undue stress on organs and bones. It also matters because people end up believing this about fat people and then discriminate against them. For example, in the workplace. Because it actually is rational to not hire someone who has shown they lack discipline and healthy habits, except for the fact that fatness and thinness tell you nothing at all about a person's level of discipline or their habits, healthy or otherwise. Now, this isn't a sermon about fatness. This isn't a service about trans inclusion. It's a service about making more space in our hearts to be more welcoming and inclusion in all of the ways that we might not be. I will say that Dr. Seligman has some good advice when it comes to fatness and thinness. He says, focus on fitness, not fatness, which is true regardless of what weight you are. But this is a sermon on how we make that space in our hearts, and that means we need to do those three things. First, we need to surround ourselves with people who share our values. Remember, that's what best counters explicit bias, like I had 25 years ago. Second, we need to be willing to look honestly at ourselves, accepting that we have bias, that we'll likely always have some bias in some area, that it isn't our fault, that we have this bias. Our society puts it there and tries to keep it there. Having bias isn't a character flaw, it's what you do with it that matters. And third, we need to do the work. We need to educate ourselves to counter societal bias within our own psyches and lovingly educate others about that societal bias, as my friend did with me 25 years ago. So that, and I quote Reverend Michael Slack, all of us can be our whole selves and can bring our whole selves to the project of getting free together. So I'll close with a few words from Michael Slack, some of which you heard already. This getting free together is the work of a lifetime, with endless reminders that the work won't ever be finished in a world like the one we're living in. Faithful embodiment of our values is about bridging the gaps between who we are and who we're called to be. So may we answer the call of love. People need our sanctuaries. May we answer the call of love. May we place love at the center as an action and as an ongoing commitment to open ourselves up in new ways, to make more space in our hearts, to be an ever more welcoming and more inclusive spiritual home. Because that's what people need. They need sanctuaries of hope, of risk-taking, of courage, of growth, of love. May it be so. May we be among those who continue to make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
When you're fearful, when you're blue, don't despair. When the world gives up on you, I'll still be there, and we'll go together into the great unknown, shelter for each other, compassion as our home, and we'll be known by our love, and we'll be known by our love, we'll be known by our love, we'll be known by our love.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join in our closing words. As we extinguish our chalice, I invite you to join me in our community blessing, inspired by the words of David Bumbaugh. This church is dedicated to the proposition that there is a unity beneath all our diversity, that we grow together by celebrating our differences, honoring a journey that reaches beyond time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to this, our shared covenant. Now that we've gathered together in this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let us go out into the world inspired to share our values. Thank you.